Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Hormones Happen. I've got a real treat for you today, a special guest. He's a scholar, an author, a 7-time Ironman triathlete, and an entrepreneur. But most importantly, he's a friend, and I would consider a mentor as well. Dr. Rob Archuleta, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Cher. I appreciate you saying all those nice things.
Well, of course, man, of course. One thing that I think we're all very curious about is you wear a lot of hats. What drives you for that type of success? Is this something that you're born with, or is this something that you've developed over time?
I think I've always been tenacious. Even one of the things you didn't mention is I'm a recovering methamphetamine addict. And so one of the things that I've been tenacious, even in my addiction, if I want something, I tend to go for it. And I think now when you lose so much time, I spent so much of my time wasted in addiction and partying, then now I feel like, I'm not trying to make up for, but now I realize the potential that was untapped. And so now I'm really driven to do the things that I didn't get to do or contribute to the world or back to society in the way that I took from society so much in the beginning of my addiction, So now I feel like I'm giving back. And, I'm a big believer in momentum. And so I don't want the momentum to slow up. So I just keep doing stuff, keep trying to give back, whether I'm teaching at the college or whether I'm doing a race or just spreading the word that people could not just recover from addiction, but succeed in life as healthy individuals. So I'm just driven to keep getting the message out there.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So you feel like that time that you kind of feel like you wasted some time and now you're kind of like making up for it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Not necessarily making up for it, just, because I don't feel like there's a clock ticking or, an hourglass running out where I have to make up for it. But just this desire to do the things that I didn't get to do. Like when people got to go to college or when they got to make friends and family and lay the foundation of a healthy life spiritually, or professionally, missed all of that. I started my life at 31 years old. So this is totally different. So, and I'm also, not that an hourglass is ticking, but I'm 52. I'm starting to feel it a little bit. It takes longer to recover.
It's hard to tell, man. It's hard to tell. And for those of you who are just tuning in, it's actually 5:15 on a Sunday, which is not abnormal for Rob to be waking up at this time. Absolutely insanity. But Rob, huge news, man. You just recently wrote a book. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I actually pulled it out. So it's called Suffer Well. This is the cover. It's funny because the number one thing people always ask, I'll do this great speech, and the number one thing they'll ask is they'll say, everybody asks about the cover, is that your back? And so, yes, it is my back. So the book, I spent so much time doing public speaking and doing conferences, and the book is about me and Sheena, and it's about our lives and recovery. But the second part of the book, I call it a Reese's cup. The first part is about my addiction. The second part is how to navigate treatment, what treatment is, who provides treatment, what are the different modalities, what's the difference between treatment and recovery, what does an intervention look like, what works, what doesn't work, what may work, what stage of change is the person in that you're trying to help. And so I always joke around and say, the great part of having lived experience is I was like an anthropologist, right? I was an anthropologist that lived with indigenous meth addicts for 10 years of my life, and now I could take that field work and that ethnography work and come forward and, use it to help others and to help people. So the first part is just kind of telling our story, and the second part of the book is to help others.
So would you say this book is applicable to people who aren't battling addictions? Are they going to take something from this as well?
But yeah, the book's about, like somebody once said in TED Talk, the opposite of addiction is connection. And so it's about addiction. It's about recovery. And, I talk in the book, everybody struggles with one of the 7 toxic compulsive behaviors, which is alcohol, drugs, food, sex, pornography, gambling, and hoarding, and tobacco. And I would probably add online shopping to that too, which all of those things have instant gratification. And so anybody could apply any of the lessons in here to, their lives. And it's not even that I'm giving lessons. I'm sharing my experience, my strength, and my hope. And so it's just sharing that with people and hopefully, giving them a little bit of a blueprint to look at.
Yeah, I think that that's the most powerful tool when someone's trying to change a behavior of their self. Relatability is huge. You can tell them what the literature and the textbooks say all day, but when someone says, I've had this problem, this is how I got through this problem, that means a lot for someone. And it
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
No, no, I agree with you. I think change is hard. Like I go over the stages of change, which are like pre-contemplative, contemplative, preparation, action, and maintenance stages. And I tell people how to look at where they're at, what stage they're in when they're trying to change, because we get stuck in the like pre-contemplative, before you're even thinking about change. That stage is usually when you're in denial. But once our society spends a lot of time contemplating, I'm sure you deal with it too all the time. Like I know
Mhm.
even before you and I started working together, my weight loss or my blood work, you contemplate for years, sometimes months,
Yep.
weeks before you actually pull the trigger. And you never know you never know what's going to spark that event to actually move into motion, right? Like I run into you a million times. Yeah, yeah, I'll do my blood work. Yeah, yeah, I'll do my blood work.
Yep.
But just contemplating, and then one day, the stars align because I've been in the contemplative stage and preparation stage. And what causes that thing to act, we never know. Like I know when I did my blood work with you, the first thing that kicked in was I just had a day off. I had to take some time off, and you and I ran into each other, and I was like, you know what? What's stopping me today? But we spend so much time contemplating change, and I think there's a fear of change. We're comfortable in situations even if they're bad because it's familiar to us. And so I think it's hard to step outside the box and just try to change anything. And so the book is about change and self-improvement, not just addiction.
That's huge. That's huge because one thing I've noticed in myself and others who I've talked to kind of on entrepreneurial journeys is that we tend to overemphasize risk and we tend to basically underemphasize benefit. And what that does is that makes us basically go about making decisions with a fear of failing, being more important than actually pursuing success. And our risk tolerance gets altered. And so, like you said, that little push, you never know how it's going to come. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs. I do a lot of speaking for entrepreneurial stuff. And a lot of people just are so miserable in their jobs, but it's manageable. And that's the worst place to be is when something's manageable because you can just say, I can put up with this for, whatever time. Nothing has really changed. It's only when it's absolutely catastrophic is it like, I have to change or you get fired or laid off. Those are situations to where you don't have a choice. But when we have a choice, it's really difficult to justify why should I change something when it's manageable?
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I think it was on Joe Rogan. They talked about being stuck in a velvet prison, right? And a velvet prison is
Mm,
like when you're comfortable, you're stuck in there, and it's a comfortable space, but you're not happy. You're just comfortable, and that can be a prison too. Just being content can be a prison. Not everybody has to be driven and driving forward and constantly living in the chaos of pursuing success. That's where I live my life. And it's not even pursuing success as much as just pursuing accomplishments. I love the feeling of, getting something done, whether it's a run, a workout, writing a book, or going to school. All of those things are amazing, but we do get comfortable. And you said it great. Like we do emphasize risk and we don't necessarily emphasize like, what's the payoff? What will we get out of it? What if it is successful? Because risk can be for sure and success can be abstract and like, it's not tangible. Like sometimes, failure feels tangible. It feels like something you could accomplish where sometimes success feels a little lofty.
right. We can visualize, we can conceptualize what failure looks like when we fall short of a goal, but we can't really conceptualize what that success looks like because at the end of the day, we're taking a chance on ourself, right? We're betting on ourself. And unfortunately, depending on the opinion you have of yourself, you'll never rise above that. And that opinion that you have of yourself is formed by the people around you, your circles, and that's huge. If you're in a caustic circle, you need to get rid of it because fact of the matter is the people around you need to build you up and build up that opinion of yourself because that's the only way you're going to actually succeed at anything you want.
I deal with it when I'm helping people in addiction all the time. Like they know for sure what it's like to be homeless. They know for sure what it's like to be accepted by people in prison and jail. But they don't know or they're unsure of what it's going to be like to be in society, what it's going to be like to apply for a job and be judged by your criminal history, what it's going to be like to be sober and deal with life on life's terms, to deal with trauma without the addiction. And, like you said, like we can visualize risk and we could also visualize being unhappy because most of us have been there, so it's hard to say like what's going to happen, I'm I'll just go off on this tangent real quick and get on a soapbox. I'm a firm believer that it shouldn't be hard work to just keep your head above water, and it shouldn't be hard work to be happy. Like I talk about it in my marriage all the time. Not my marriage is imperfect, but I always tell people like it shouldn't be that hard. Counseling you shouldn't have to. I mean, I'm an advocate for counseling, but if you're in a place where you're married and you're like, you got to get
Mhm.
counseling to stay together, that could be like that whole like, why are we trying this hard? Like, it shouldn't be that hard. We should be able to have fun. Of course, you're going to step on each other. That's just relationships, right? You're going to be mad one day.
Sure.
The TV's too loud. I didn't put the
Oh,
toilet
yeah.
seat down. I'm annoying to Sheena. Do you know what I mean? But it shouldn't be that hard, right? Life should not be, our situation should not be a daily knife fight. You know what I mean? Like, I know sometimes we're born or step into those situations, but once we're like up and running, like we should pursue what makes us happy and what gives us peace. You know what I mean? This life is really short. We only have like, I always say we only have a dash, and 73 is when I was born, dash, whatever. What am I going to fill
Right.
that dash with? Do you know what I mean? Am I going to fill it with anxiety and stress and disappointment? Or do I want to fill that dash with other things? So, I think you're right. It's easy to visualize failure and it's easy to visualize being unhappy. The rest of it is super difficult.
It is. It is. And you're right. We don't know how long we have to live. We just, I always talk to people who are like, I want to leave my W-2 job and I want to start my own business. And their concern is, I don't know if I don't know if I'll make it. And they say, well, at 62 and a half, I can start collecting retirement. But it's like, is it going to be enough? Are you sure that is worth it? Because are you going to even make it 62 and a half? It's not guaranteed. You're gambling either way, but you're always going to win if you gamble on yourself, because that's an independent variable you have control over. And one thing that I realized is if I suffer more, I build a tolerance to it, if that makes sense. So for me, I always work out first thing in the morning. I do it because if I start my morning off with suffering, something I don't necessarily want to do, but I do it anyway, wake up early in the morning, go to the gym, the rest of the day is cake.
Yeah. Well, my book's called Suffer Well, Jer. So you're making that. So everybody asks me about that because I have Suffer Well tattooed on my back. In the beginning, Suffer Well was about doing endurance sports, right? I do ultra marathons, ultra Spartans, CrossFit. I'm with you, like suffering well. But it really derives from, in my head, from a Buddhist principle. And one of the Four Noble Truths of Buddhist principles is that to exist is to suffer, right? And I think that suffering's relative, right? I say this in my book. If you're born a millionaire, you might want a blue Porsche and you have a red Porsche. And that's your version of suffering, is I can't get a red Porsche. If you're born in poverty, not having a mill is your version of suffering, right? We only know what we know. But the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And so suffering well is about, we're not going to get out of this life without some form of suffering, whether it's food poisoning, the flu, whatever. So it should be about accepting the fact that we will suffer and then suffering well through it. And I'll tell you honestly, like, I don't know if I would want a life that was filled with no suffering, because it makes the sweet so much sweeter. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
crossing the finish line of a hard race, or even climbing to the top of a hill on a gravel bike and then getting to the top and catching your breath, all of that kind of suffering it's just such a huge feeling for me and my life. Like, overcoming mountains and finishing those races, the finish line feels so much better when you know that you've earned it, and I also just will say this, like, I feel like we could accept failure when we give 100%. It's harder to accept failure when we didn't give 100%. And so I think it's easier. So, but yeah, I do. I think that, the book Suffer Well, it's about that. It's about, no matter where you come from, what you've been through, you can make it out of it. We can suffer well. We can make those suffering life lessons that can help others and even help form and build who we are.
absolutely. I mean, how can we strengthen ourself and our mind without some type of adversity? That's exercise for our mental, spiritual state. And a failure is only a failure if you make it one. Otherwise, it's just a costly learning experience. That's really about it. Now, what motivated you to write this book? Did you see that, hey, I see a lot of people that this would really help? This can be really relatable to a lot of people. What were some of the driving factors that made you say, I'm ready to be an author?
Yeah, I wish it was that honorable. It was super selfish. Do you know what I mean? Like, number one, right? It was almost like a confession because sometimes I sit up in gratitude after a workout in the morning and the world's quiet. That's the great part of getting up early, right? The world's quiet. I spend a lot of time in my head by myself. And I think about everything my parents have done for me. I think about, the love I have for Sheena or my brother. And I don't always bring it up. Like, I don't always bring up the past and say, hey, like, I'm sorry about that time I stole this from you or whatever. Do you know what I mean? But I really did not want the ideas and feelings that I have to die with me, right? I wanted to be able to say, like, how could I put this all in one place so that my family knows what I went through and how I feel about them? So my brother knows, so Sheena knows how I feel about them. And, it started with that. It started with me wanting to confess and get it all out to them, almost like a love letter to them to say, like, hey, this is the journey we were on. This is the journey we're on now. But then it turned into like, once I went to an editor, I was working with this editor in New York and he said, why would people read your book? You're not famous. Do you know, you might be famous in your
Sure.
hometown, but you're not famous. And I got to the point where I was like, you're right. I'm not famous. So let's stand on my past experiences to build credibility for helping you and helping others so that you could see like this is where I started, this is where I'm at. So the book, because I wanted people to read it and not just be like, oh, I'm reading about this guy from a small town's, drug addiction, but also what can I get out of it? What can I take that can nourish it? Can nourish somebody else. And so the book evolved from like me just wanting to confess, share my feelings and get it all out there and kind of like cleanse myself of, not even cleanse, but just pour what my feelings were, and not just have them rattling around in my head onto pages. And then it turned into like, hey, I'd like to share this with other people. What can I give them besides my story? Because my story's, it's helpful, but what did I learn from it and how can I help others? And I really tapped into like my education and my personal and professional experiences to write the second half of the book. And the second half is just as important as the first half.
Sure. Did you go through quite a bit of emotions going through this? Was it kind of a cathartic experience for you? Was it kind of bringing up some of these negative experiences in the past? How did that go? How'd you feel about all that?
Yeah, like I mean that's a great question. Some of the stuff is because I was, in addiction, some of it I had to like really take a second and go, is this what happened or is this what people told me happened? Am I romanticizing this? Was I overemphasizing something? And overall what I think I did is I played a lot of it down. I played a lot of it down because I didn't want to talk about growing up with childhood traumatic experiences or sexual traumatic experiences. I didn't want to go into the depths and the deep part of addiction because we've all heard those stories, right? I don't need to tell you what it's like to be an addict. Just look around your community and you could see it. And I didn't need to give an origin story. Like, nothing's worse than seeing Batman movie where they relive Batman's parents getting shot.
Right.
Okay, we know how Batman became Batman. Let's just get on with
Right.
the movie.
Hmm.
And so I didn't think anybody needed an origin story and I didn't need to romanticize trauma or addiction. I just kind of like, so I feel like I played it down a lot, but in playing it down, I had to work through those emotions because your instinct is always to sensationalize and put down what's on paper, like what you're feeling. And I was like, is this helpful? Is it helpful to say I shot up methamphetamine or I smoked methamphetamine? Or is it more helpful to say, I drew the blood from my, into the syringe and blah, blah.
Right.
I start the book like that, right? I talk about smoking foil. The book starts with, the flame is dancing against the foil, and I explain that just to paint the picture at first, but I don't go into the depths of the disgusting or dark side of addiction because, or traumatic experiences because we all know, and a lot of time our imagination is worse than what we're putting on the page. So I just say like, yeah, I was a drug addict. Yeah, I went through sexual traumatic experiences. Let's move into the good stuff now. Do you know what I mean? And so
Sure.
that was the part that I had a lot of feelings about, like in just having to work through, like, am I watering it down? What's the point? Is it self-serving to paint this picture? I don't want to paint a poor me picture, and I don't want to paint a poor people in addiction picture. I just was like, what is helpful and what is helpful and what is, digestible. I don't want,
Right.
we know from DUI ads, like if you show somebody getting hit by a car, it doesn't prevent DUIs because most of the time, if it's a horrific ad, people look away and then they don't get. And I didn't want anybody looking away. I wanted them to go, okay, that registered. What next?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's absolutely very courageous to go ahead and put these very sensitive, very emotional things down on a piece of paper literature and distribute it to other people so they can kind of relate to that. And people that haven't had these drug addictions, granted, like you said, we all have addictions to something, there's still relatability. It might not be injecting a needle into the vein, but it could be going to the gas station and getting a bag of chips, right? Or a lottery ticket or drinking a beer on the weekends, every weekend, right? And so I think it's very courageous what you did. And a lot of people try to forget those experiences and just pretend they just walk away from it, right? But you had to dig into it and you had to detail it to write it down on the paper. And so for you, you kind of had to live it again.
Yeah. You know what's crazy, Jared, is like people that read my book, because I talk about drug addiction and then I talk about how I cross addicted over into food addiction, right? And I gained a lot of weight. I think when I met you, I was really heavy.
Yep.
So a lot of people were like, because in my book, I say, like, even in my worst drug addiction, I was never suicidal. But when I was really heavy and addicted to food and unable to and just unable to stop eating, unable to and just felt like I was in somebody else's body, I had some suicidal ideations and thoughts and some dark thoughts. And it just shows you that, something that is very prevalent in our society, food addiction and struggle with weight, I don't even know how to say it. It's extremely prevalent, and it's so harmful to us spiritually, emotionally, mentally, when we are heavy and not feeling comfortable in our own body. And I'm not fat shaming anybody. Like, I'm talking about being healthy. I'm not talking about having a six pack. I mean, I blew up from like 165 to 290 fast, like in 4 months of being in recovery. And then you start questioning, like, yes, I'm not doing meth, but I'm doing this other thing that's destroying me just as fast. And so for me, the exciting part of the book is when people go like, I didn't know other people felt that way about food. You know what I mean? And so,
Sure.
and I've struggled with it my whole life, and then even being a vegetarian for spiritual reasons, like, being a vegetarian means a lot of carbs some of the time. And so even
Yep.
learning how to balance that, and what's the difference between it being a plant-based athlete and somebody who eats French fries is being vegetarian? And so
Right.
so yeah, I think that there's a lot about food addiction in the book too that I think people, there's things I think I put in there, like struggling with states of pleasurelessness when you're not on drugs, struggling with food addiction, learning how to be intimate and have a relationship again, because when you're not in those things, you're really, everybody around you is meeting a new person, and you are a new person
Mhm.
when you're sober, and you got to find out, like, what do I do? How do I live life? How do I like my eggs cooked? Because normally, if when you're in addiction, you're like, I'll just take whatever scraps is given to me. But then all of a sudden you're sober and you're like, wait, I could choose how my eggs are. I don't have to take somebody's leftover eggs. So it's learning how to do all those things again.
Right. We're all looking for that next hit of dopamine. That's really just
Yeah.
what it is, right? Mesolimbic system in the brain just releases the dopamine reward signaling for these things that we do. And we're always looking for the next one. And social media, I think that's the next addiction we're seeing all the time, especially with infinite scroll, these short little reels, our attention spans. I'm seeing a lot of really negative end results with this stuff. But tell me this, Robin, tell me how this all ties in. Your fitness journey. Ever since I've known you, you've always been training for something. You've always been exercising, very routine. How does that fit into your overall recovery, into becoming an author, an entrepreneur, a scholar? Tell us about
Well,
that.
I think you hit it on the head when you said, if I get up and do something hard or something difficult right off the bat, then I know the rest of my day is going to be good. For me, I tapped into exercise and we founded Addict to Athlete, a program that helps people get sober by using athletics, because I was trying to combat obesity. right? And then I started realizing that through exercise, I was processing the counseling that I was going through. I was processing the support groups I was attending. I would go on a run afterwards and I would play the conversations back in my head. And I started processing almost like this is interesting, right? So it's almost like a lot of the reason people do ketamine or they do like the MDMA experiences is so that you could relive those traumatic experiences while your body's flooded with dopamine and serotonin, right? So then it's not as, there's not a physical connection to the trauma and you're able to work through it without feeling sick or feeling. And that's essentially what exercise did. When you're on a run and you're thinking about traumatic experiences, your endorphins are going, your serotonin, your dopamine levels hitting perfect, and you're able to think about those traumatic experiences, but not have it connected to a negative feeling in the body. And that was the same thing with addiction. And I started realizing how therapeutic running and endurance sports was. The thoughts and, feelings I was having and processing while you're on a 112-mile bike ride or a 2.4-mile swim. And you're going through all those things and you're thinking about it. And it's very therapeutic, especially when you're processing. And so for me, it became a part of like, how do I take this into the future so that I don't fall back in, so that when life does get hard, I don't fall back into those negative behaviors? Because one thing that you know when you're an addict is when I feel bad, I could feel good again by using. Like, I don't have to
Mhm.
deal with this shit. I could just get high and feel better instantly. And it was almost like became a part of recovery, but also a part of prevention as well. How do I prevent myself from having those feelings and the feelings of giving up or the feelings of it's unbearable to go outside today because I'm struggling with my mental health? I always started it with the run. And I talk about that. Like I struggled with some, I call it faux agoraphobia, but I wasn't unwilling to give up running. And so even though I was scared to leave the house because of fear of something tragic happening, my desire to run helped me push through any thoughts that could have turned into full blown agoraphobia. And so for me, any exercise has not just become about, defining who I am and the connection to other people because we met through exercise, right? We met through
We
working
did.
out together and you meet some
Yep.
of the greatest people in the world and that connections that you have through exercise, but then also the therapeutic value of working out, whether it's yoga, CrossFit, running, anything, any part of it, getting out, moving, connecting with others, and then spending time in your own head processing while you exercise, and then the feeling of achievement. It is very similar to addiction. It is something I'm dependent on, not addicted to. Does that make sense? And so
It
it's
does.
just become a part of my journey and who I am.
Sure, it defines you. That's part of who you are now. And the thing is until our health is in check, we can't work on anything else. Our body will prioritize it. When your health is in a poor state, guess what? You can't focus on anything else, any other problems until your health is in check. Once your health's in check, now you can start saying, oh, I need to gas up the car. Oh man, I need to pay the mortgage, right? You have all these other responsibilities you have to do. But if your health is being neglected, guess what, guys? Nothing else is going to happen. Now, what gave you, though, that initial push to say, hey, I'm going to go on a run, right? You weren't just born a runner. You decided one day, like, I want to try exercise. What does that look like?
Yeah, I want to say this really quick because you hit a great point. Like, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And you're looking at like what our human basic need is. When I was in addiction, my basic need was drugs, right? When you're sick, your basic need is I want to feel better. Like sometimes I'll want something so bad, I'll be like, I have to have the new iPhone. I have to have it. And then I'll wake up with a headache and be like, oh God, I don't need the phone. I just want my head to feel better. Do you know what I mean? And so, like,
Yep.
our basic need is always to feel better. And even like when I'm at work, if I'm uncomfortable in my own skin because I've gained 10 pounds, I'm not counseling or being a director with the same confidence because I'm distracted by how my stomach's hanging over my belt. And that's just me.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everybody needs to be
Right.
worried about that. I worry about it and I can't focus on helping others if I'm in my own head about myself, right? And that's not just physically, that's also how it's impacting me mentally. When I went out on a run, like what motivated me, like I said, what motivated me at first was to lose weight and just honestly, Jared, like when you're in it, when you get sober and you're just like trying to throw spaghetti at the wall to see what can keep you sober. I was going to Barnes and Noble and I was closing my eyes and picking books. I was
Mm.
trying everything to just find myself. And, being overweight and not having a lot of money, we lived across the street from a middle school and I just went over there and We couldn't afford a CrossFit. We couldn't afford that. And I just said, I'm going to walk the straights and then run the corners of the track. Walk the straights, run the corners, walk the straights, run the corners. And I was going to community college at the time. And then, I would go to school all day and then come home, walk the straights, run the corners, because I just wanted to just find something. And eventually it became, walk the corners, run the straights. And then that turned into like, maybe I could do a 5K, maybe. And then this just shows you my addictive personality. I went from doing a 5K to a half marathon the very next race, which I write in my book about taking pre-workout and throwing up blue pre-workout all over the snow in the first half marathon I ever did. But for me, it was leaving no stone unturned, right? I tried Catholicism. I tried going back to church. I tried going to AA and NA. I was just turning over stones. And one of the stones I just happened to turn over was running. I turned that over. And then now that I've gotten older, I run like I ran this morning. Sheena and I did a 5K and I did an ultra marathon this summer, but I like gravel biking and spinning more. So now that I just keep turning over stones to see what interests me, what could keep me in the game. And, that's what I did. I think that's the most important part of when you're changing something, whether you're trying to get in shape or you're trying to lose weight, just keep turning over the stones. Like not everything's going to work. I mean, I tried a million things that I did not like until I found one I did. In fact, I was doing kickboxing before I got into running. I was going and
Oh,
doing
wow.
like kickboxing at AKKA. And I was just, I was always sore. I was always beat up and it didn't work for me, right? It didn't work.
Sure.
I was like, this is not for me. I don't like getting beat up. But, I tried that. That didn't work. I tried even doing like aerobic kickboxing. That didn't work. I just kept trying. I tried insanity. I did that for a little while. It's just trying and leaving things unturned, just like with anything. You never know what's going to fit. But if you're not trying, if you're not turning over rocks, then you may be missing out on something that could be, a defining behavior of your whole entire life. And I just happened to turn over the stone that was running and I was like, man, that feels good. It's a good fit for me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It sounds like that was the beginning of what I would say was your entrepreneurial journey. And with entrepreneurism, people think you have to have a business, right? But the reality is it's building the courage to change your situation and bet on yourself, whether that's leaving an unhealthy relationship, going back to school, starting exercise. You knew what the risks of staying in your drug addiction were. And you said, this is comfortable enough, but you took a risk on yourself and said, I don't know what's going to happen if I stop. I don't even know if I can stop, but you did it anyway. And I think that's really, really amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Jared. I appreciate that. I think too, like, you could be building a business that's based on, the currency is, putting money in the bank, or you could build a business and the currency is experience and connection, right? And, Sheena has the CrossFit gym. We have, she has Addict to Athlete. It doesn't make a lot of money, but it's rich in building experiences and friendships. It's rich in changing lives. Sheena and I were talking about it this morning when we were running. Our buddy Todd's getting married. And I was like, we were a part of that journey. We were a part of Todd's journey. And, now that he's going to get married, it feels like, like, wow, we were a part of that success. We were a part of that connection. And so, being an entrepreneur is not just about building a business and putting money in the bank. It could be about building a business and putting experiences in the bank, putting experiences, and sometimes that matters more, like that matters so much more because I've had money several times in my life, even in addiction, but it's not the same. It's when you earn it and when you have those other things that leave an imprint on your life, like, and I'm sure I get it. I get it from when I'm dealing with you, like Jared, I'm going to confess something like, you helped me with doing trizepatide and it's not a confession, but I'm working out so hard, like 6 workouts a day, not losing weight, struggling with the food noise, still having some, and even you helping me get on it to microdose it, you have to get something out of that. Like when I'm at a gravel race and I'm like crushing it at 52 years old and beating young guys and I'm able to wear a cycling outfit and not look like a caterpillar stuck in a cycling outfit, like you played a part in that, you played a part in helping me with that. And so you have to get that too, even though you're making money doing it and building a business. You've 100% made my life better by helping, introducing me and doing blood work and even, kind of giving us warnings about it. You don't need to take the whole thing. Just try to
Yep.
microdose. Just try a little bit. You just need to take
Sure.
the edge off and finding that healthy that healthy balance between, why wouldn't I do testosterone or why wouldn't I do trizepatide if it's going to improve my
Mhm.
life? Because nobody can look at me and go, oh, you're taking the easy way out. I'm like, oh, yeah, right. I did 6 workouts today. I'm not taking the easy way out. Why wouldn't I do a peptide that is going to help me get over and break the plateaus that could lead to me being frustrated and stopping? And
Right.
so you get to see that too. You're building those experiences and connections. So hats off to you for what you're
Absolutely.
doing.
Yeah, thanks. We all have to have our purpose, right? At the end of the day, we all need to define what success looks like for us. Some people say it is money, and then they usually find out it's not, right? Purpose is different to everyone. But tell us a little bit about this potential fundraiser that's coming up.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to just say this real quick because I know we're going to run out of time. But one of the things I want to say is anytime I'm speaking in public and somebody asks me, why do we have a drug problem in the United States? I always respond, and I have a PhD in human behavior. So I professionally and personally, I think we have a purpose problem in the United States. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, right? That old quote. And I think that without purpose, it's easy to fall into addiction. Without purpose, it's easy to fall in. Our parents had the same issues that we have as a society, but their purpose was to survive. And now that we have a lot less opportunity to fail because there's so many guardrails and safety nets that keep people in their addiction, I think that when you have purpose, you're more likely to succeed. So the fundraiser, right? So I've looked at what everybody's done. Like people have run ultra marathons, people have swam thousands of miles, they've ridden hundreds of miles, and I kind of looked into it and I never seen anybody do this, but I want to do 50 Murphs in 50 different places, 50 days in a row, right? We've seen somebody do an
Yeah.
Ironman in those. Murph sucks. It's a terrible
Yep.
workout, but we always do it for a great cause. During COVID, we racked quite a few Murphs together. So I know it's possible to do them one day after another. But as far as I know, nobody's done 50 of them in 50 days. And so that's what I'm going to do. I want to work with the Challenge Athlete Foundation to give back to them. If we can't make that happen, we'll do it with one of the animal foundations. My wife has a program called Raiden's Athletic Friends, and it's a way for athletes to give back to animals. We're big advocates for animals because I think that our pets taught us how to love after addiction. They showed us what, unconditional love is. And so our pets were a part of our healing. So I'll work with them. The goal is to work with the Challenge Athletes Foundation and get enough money so that I can get a ticket into the Leadville 100 mountain bike race because I would like to challenge myself. I don't even own a mountain bike right now. I do gravel riding, but if I get in, I'll get a mountain bike, and start training for it. But
Yep.
the 50 Murphs in 50 days is a way to bring attention to not just Murph himself, but also to veterans and to the Challenge Athletes Foundation and to people that struggle. I had the pleasure of training somebody that was an amputee. He had trained him for Ironman, and we got to go do the Challenge Athlete Foundation race in San Diego, and they treated us like gold. It was amazing. I got to swim in the ocean doing a race with somebody that was doing, a swim, an open water ocean swim that did not have arms. And when you see that, like you're like, and I'm having anxiety about sharks, and this person has no arms. I'm like, I better step it up. Like this person's showing me what's possible. And then doing a race with somebody that's missing a leg, and races, we raced with people who were burn victims, amputees, people who had been born with, you know, mental health issues, and just, man, seeing that the Challenge Athlete Foundation does some cool stuff, and I would like to give back to them and be a part of that. And at the same time set another goal to challenge myself to do 50 Murphs in 50 days.
That's awesome. And just for those unaware, just tell us real quick so they can understand how difficult this is. What is a Murph?
So it was originally called body armor. And the veteran Murph, we do it, to honor him. And it's part of CrossFit's Hero Wads. It's a 25-pound weight vest. You run 2 miles. So you run a mile and you do 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats, and then run another mile. So for me, it's funny because people think it's the running is not for me. The pull-ups with the vest is tangible. I have bad runner's knees, so the squats are always the worst thing for me. If I could get through the squats, maybe I'll rehabilitate my knees in the process.
Wow, yeah, 50 of those. That is quite the challenge. And as we get closer to kind of knowing more about it, we'll definitely have you on to promote it a little bit more. But also, as far as your book goes, where can people find this? Where can they
Yeah,
find Suffer Well?
yeah. So listen, I I did not read it, and everybody's like, "Why didn't you read it?" But the audiobook, Aaron Goodwin that read it does such an amazing job. And it's funny because I auditioned people and there was this young kid that kind of looked like I looked when I was younger, and he reads it. So the audiobook is available on Audible, it's available on Apple Books. The book is available at Amazon and it's available at Barnes and Noble. Anywhere you could get books, it's out there, it's floating around out there. I truly, truly love listening to it. I loved the Audible. I didn't get emotional when I wrote it as much as, or even when I read it after it was done. But when I heard him reading it, it felt like somebody else's life, and I got super emotional. So, I think that if you could get the audio book and you could get it in Audible, or you could get the book on Amazon is the easiest way to get it. I think the paperback is cheaper than the hardcover. And then just a quick plug, I will be at Grassroots Scrabble. I'm doing the 75-mile bike race on next Saturday, but Friday night I will be on the 10th. I will have a booth and we'll be selling Suffer Well shirts, and we're going to be selling the books, and I'll be doing a book signing there.
Awesome. That's amazing. Plus, with the audiobook, you can listen to it as you're running, right?
Yeah.
Dual purpose. Now, Rob, before we end the podcast, what are some closing words you'd like to say to someone who just needs that little push to just make that positive change in their life, whatever that may be for them?
Yeah. So I think that Dr. Cornell West said it, and we have it in a banner in the gym. Bill Maher asked Dr. Cornell West what was the cure for addiction. And it's funny because I got to meet Dr. Cornell West and I showed him the picture and he goes, "Did I really say that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, go back and watch it. I'm Bill Maher." It's funny when you say so many profound things, you don't remember it. But I think it's love, courage, and conviction. Love yourself and others enough to change or to pursue what you want us to pursue. Have the courage to do things that you've never done before. And courage isn't always slaying a dragon. Sometimes it's putting on a Subway uniform. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's going to work at a fast food restaurant so that you could feed your kids. And conviction, have the conviction to stand by what you say and to pursue, happiness with the same conviction that we have for things that we won't tolerate, right? Like we'll have conviction like I'll never do this, but do you have the conviction to say I will do this? So I would say like if you could tap into love, courage, and conviction, I think that you'll have a lot easier pursuing the things that could make your life better.
Well, I love it. Rob, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Cher. I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on, and congratulations with all the success. I feel like you're my little Hito, and I'm so proud of you. So it's good
Thanks, brother.
seeing you kill it. All right, Jer. All right, thanks, man.